privilege to have a meeting in this church with the same idea of bringing people together. So it is an honor for the monastic community to welcome Dr. Tipi and the presenter of this afternoon. So if you please come up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to see you. Thank you for coming out to today's event. My name is Dr. Matthew Tapie. I'm the director of the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies here at Saint Leo University. I'm also a professor of theology in the Department of Philosophy, Theology, and Religion. It's a joy to see all of you here today for this special event. I want to say a little bit about what the event is. So you are here today at the second ever Rabbi Rudin lecture. There have been, now this is our second Rabbi Rudin lecture. The first one was given in 2013 by Suzanne Etchell. And so today is the second Rabbi Rudin lecture given by Ambassador David Saperstein and on the topic of the persecution of Christians and other religious minorities across the globe. We're honored today also to have special guests. We have Jim and Marcia Rudin with us, and so I just wanted to recognize them for a moment because if it weren't for Jim and Marcia Rudin, we wouldn't be here. They actually helped start the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies. So Jim and Marcia, if you don't mind standing up for us. Rabbi Rudin is the interreligious advisor, senior interreligious advisor for the American Jewish Committee, a very important Jewish organization and advocacy group that is here in Florida and also in the United States. It was a lot of important work, and so having Jim here with us is a real blessing for all of us. And at the end of our time together, we've asked for Rabbi Jim and Abbot Isaac to lead us in prayer for people who are being persecuted for their faith. And so today we also will get a chance toward the end of our time together to pray for people who are really going through very difficult situations. Rabbi David Saperstein was the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom from January 2015 to January 2017. An ordained rabbi, he served for several decades as the director of the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism, representing the public policy positions of American Jewry to the government and leading the movement's efforts to strengthen social justice programming in synagogues across North America. Over the years, he headed several national religious coalitions, including co-chairing the Coalition to Preserve Religious Liberty, and he served on various national boards, among them the NAACP, People for the American Way, and the World Faith Development Dialogue. In 1999 and 2000, David Saperstein served as the first chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. He was a crucial part of the faith-based movement that supported passage of the 1998 International Religious Freedom Act. A frequent media commentator on religion and public life, Saperstein is also an attorney and taught for over 30 years seminars on First Amendment law and Jewish law at Georgetown University Law Center. Will you please join me in warmly welcoming Ambassador at Large, David Saperstein.
Dr. Tapie, thank you very much for your lovely introduction. I'm truly honored to be here. First, Saint Leo University is a major institution in Catholic life in the United States of America. And its impact is felt widely across the country, and it has had a series of leaders who have been great institution builders in the last 30 years, and we are all indebted to the enormous contribution it's made across the country, and also to its leading work in the arena of Christian-Jewish relations. That I should be asked to give a lecture named for Rabbi Jim Rudin is for me an extraordinary, not just honor, but pleasure. He has been a friend throughout my entire career. His remarkable daughter, Rabbi Eve Rudin, has been a colleague. I kind of crossed the generations between the two of them, and she has done some remarkable work in her own right. That he is married to Marcia Rudin, who is a writer in her own right. I hope you've had a chance to read her latest novel that has been so well received recently. It makes it a special pleasure. But it is difficult to convey exactly what Jim Rudin means in the field of interfaith relations. In the entire American Jewish community, for many decades, he was first among equals of the leading figures in interfaith relations. There was nobody quite like him that enjoyed the respect, the universal acclaim that Jim Rudin evoked for people. It really was remarkable. That you have him here at St. Leo's, connected with these is really a remarkable thing. That you have Dr. Rabbi, sure he'd be pleased with that, Dr. Eugene Fisher, who was my colleague when he was at the U.S. Catholic Bishops, running their interfaith and their Catholic-Jewish relations program for a number of decades. That you have both of them attached here. Well, I have to confess to you, I am not a New York Yankees fan, but that's like having Ruth and Garrett at the same time on the same team, and that's something remarkable. That Matthew Tapey is now is doing such a great job. I guess that's the way Ruth and Garrett felt when Joe DiMaggio arrived here. So you've got quite a slugger's row leading this effort. I'm truly honored, Jim, to be here with you, my dear friend, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this distinguished university. So I've been asked to speak today about religious freedom across the globe and persecution of Christians and other religious minorities in this nation, the United States, founded by refugees who had so often fled religious persecution. Religious freedom was essential to the United States from its very beginning. It is the first freedom espoused in our Bill of Rights. And on that foundation, over the past over 2 centuries, we have built a system that protects the rights of religious believers and non-believers alike to worship, practice, share, change their beliefs, express their beliefs freely. Religious freedom has always been at the center of American values and our success as a nation, just as it is a vital component today of our foreign policy work. In the Article 6 ban on a religious test for office, and the commitment to free exercise of religion, and the ban on establishment of religion, those 3 constitutional references to religion, did something remarkable. It created for the first time in all of human history, it created a nation in which one's rights as a citizen would not depend upon our religious identity, our religious practices, our religious beliefs. This was a revolutionary notion. The first time in all of human history that a political system was put together based on that notion. Like many of our promised rights in our founding documents, we did not get there very quickly. It took us many generations to actually see the fulfillment of those rights, during which time both Catholics and Jews were subject to expressions of group hatred, discrimination, interference in our lives, hate crimes. That's also part of the history of America. But in the ebb and flow of our freedoms, that midpoint kept moving further and further until in the 1940s, the Supreme Court of the United States gave robust interpretations to both the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of the Constitution of the United States. And what a difference it made. Both our communities were able to move sometimes to the peripheries of American society to the very center of American political, academic, economic, professional lives. In the next 40 years after that, this country changed for many minority groups. And the irony is when polls today ask the question, would you be comfortable voting for someone of particular religious groups for President of the United States, where when these polls were first taken 30 years ago, Catholics and Jews were kind of mid-level. Today, we score higher than Protestants do on these polls. Something that those who were subject to the riot against Catholic schools in Philadelphia in the late 1800s would have found something astonishing about America. So this has been an extraordinary country in terms of our religious freedom. Our Declaration of Independence made clear that such liberties were the inherent right of all, not the creation of the state, to give or take away as it pleased, as we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, or as Pope Francis has said, may you defend these rights, particularly religious freedom, for it has been given to you by God Himself. I'll be focusing my remarks on the international agenda of religious freedom, with, in respect for the setting in which we have gathered here, a particular focus on the current situation facing Christians across the globe, and the enormous challenges and, yes, the opportunities that Christians face. Now, let me just say, in the evolution of international norms, that period in the 1940s where the Supreme Court of the United States gave that robust interpretation to what it meant to embrace religious freedom, it was exactly the point that the United Nations was being founded. And in the late 1940s, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was enshrined as the core document of human rights, that the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, that is the active human rights document of the international community, were being forged. American ideas permeated the shaping of those international documents. Article 18 of both of these documents provides for freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, including the freedom to change religion or belief, the freedom to manifest religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Article 18 of the ICCPR also provides that, quote, no one shall be subject to coercion, which would impair his or her freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his or her choice. Pretty clear. But here's one of the problems. To get it accepted, particularly amongst countries that did not have a tradition of religious freedom, including countries in which majority religions were enmeshed with the government, they had to put a balancing proviso into the Article 18. And it says, there are limitations prescribed by law and are necessary to protect public safety, order, health, or morals, or the fundamental rights and freedoms of others. Now, while that was intended to be limiting language, some countries have justified extraordinary interference into religious freedom on the basis of that criteria. This language leads to significant ambiguity as to where the lines are drawn between religious freedom and government limitations, thus creating many of the justifications for coercive government restrictions that pose our toughest challenges in protecting and promoting religious freedom. And we seek to promote religious freedom not only because it empowers individuals and those with whom they choose to associate to exercise a fundamental right, but because it furthers a range of other values and interests central to the democratic world. The idea that it is the more religious freedom there is, the more we see it as a driver for peace and security and development. It helps our efforts to counter violent extremism, to ease sectarian strains, and allow religion to play a more robust role in providing for social service needs and educational needs of needy people all across the globe. All across the globe today. And no nation can fulfill its potential when its people are denied the right to express their innermost beliefs and to live peacefully in accordance with their conscience. So this is both a matter of self-interest and a matter of fundamental values. During my tenure, a little over 2 years as the ambassador at large, I had the opportunity to travel to 35 countries, 82 cities, to meet with minorities all across the globe. And in many countries, religious freedom flourishes. People are free to choose their faith, to change their faith, to speak about their faith to others, to teach their faith to their children. They are free to build places of worship, to worship alone or in fellowship with others, and they're free to practice no religion if they wish. In such societies, denominations and faith groups organize as their leaders and members see fit. Interfaith cooperation flourishes. Indeed, I would argue there is more interfaith cooperation across the globe today than at any point in all of human history. And religious communities are free, therefore, to contribute significantly to social welfare and to serve as a moral compass to their nations. At the same time, as our annual International Religious Freedom Report has so thoroughly documented, in far too many countries, people face daunting, alarming, and growing challenges on account of their beliefs. We can think of the so-called countries of particular concern designated in our annual State Department and Religious Freedom process. We designate them as having systemic, egregious violations of religious freedom. Eritrea, Iran, China, Burma, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and of course, North Korea. Almost every major religion and many smaller ones suffer in one or more of these countries. In many of these countries, Christians face daunting challenges and often abuses in many of them. In countries where once proud traditions of religious diversity, multi-faith cooperation, and positive coexistence were the norm, we have witnessed growing numbers of religious minority communities being driven out of their historic homelands. And in too many countries, prisoners of conscience suffer cruel punishment, even torture, for their religious beliefs and practices. It is the responsibility of all of us to give voice to the voiceless, to put a human face on those around the world who are seeking simply to peacefully live their lives in accordance with their conscience or their religious beliefs. And there are many. There are many. Let us not lose sight that every one of the numbers represented in government and NGO reports, every one of them who suffered restrictions on their religious freedoms, are human beings with a family, with dreams, with conscience, want to live peacefully in accordance with his or her core beliefs. This is what they want. And yet we see persecution in so many areas across the globe today. And this is a central challenge to us. Think about where we are right now. The jailing of Christian pastors and Baha'is in Iran. The targeting of Baha'is for mistreatment in Yemen by the Houthi authorities. The imprisonment of non-Muslims and Muslims alike on charges of denigrating religion in Egypt. The prosecution of members of minority groups and the Ahmadis for blasphemy in Pakistan. Limitations on the right to freedom of religion or belief in each one of those countries of particular concern. Anti-Semitic incidents continuing to rise globally. Turkmenistan and Tajikistan maintaining incredibly tight controls on the free practice of religion. The Chinese government's ongoing campaign to control religious beliefs and activities, in part by torturing, detaining, imprisoning thousands of religious practitioners here, from Tibetan Buddhists to Uyghur Muslims to Falun Gong, and Muslim communities, including the Rohingya in Burma, facing violence, discrimination. Now, why do Christians face disproportionately discrimination? Well, it is testimony to the success of Christianity. Because it is spread across the globe, and because it is almost always religious minorities that are afflicted by persecution and discrimination. Christians are minorities in more countries than any other religions. And so they are subject disproportionately to that kind of discrimination and persecution. So where we see threats to religious freedom today, they tend to fall into four categories. The first has been the rise of non-state actors in 5 years, of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and growingly militant Hindu groups in India, militant Buddhist groups in Burma and Sri Lanka. This has been the source of much of the oppression that has taken place. ISIS, we know the brutality, the willingness to ethnically cleanse, engage in genocidal activity against the Christian community, the Kakai, the Shabbat, the Yazidi community. Extraordinarily proud of our nation's strong position to stop that potential genocide against the Yazidis and others there when President Obama chose to say, "I will not allow the express intent of ISIS to wipe out and eviscerate the Yazidi presence on Mount Sinjar in August of 2014. And our intervention saved countless numbers of lives. And yet, in those areas that ISIS controlled, the Yazidi community, the Christian communities, the Shabbat and the Kakai and the other smaller minorities, they were horribly oppressed, often forced convert, living under immense restrictions, often ethnically cleansed. This was genocidal activity. And I was proud that Secretary Kerry made a determination of genocidal activity. But we had already been acting for an entire year before that was made, as though this were genocide, mobilizing the international military coalition to try and prevent the evisceration of these historic communities. Remember, there were Christian communities. There were Christian communities that going back long before Islam came into the world in Iraq. This was something, an extraordinary place for communities to live together. The tomb of Jonah from the Bible is in that area. So this was a place where minorities, with all their problems, had lived together over centuries. Today, all of that is imperiled. It will be a challenge for us to continue to preserve the couple of 100,000 of the over 1.2 million Christians who lived in Iraq just 20 years ago, and less than 200,000 left. And the United States is leading the way to take those steps necessary to allow those who fled the Nineveh plain to be able to return in security and safety. But it is an immense challenge for those communities and for the world. Similarly, Boko Haram has killed thousands through both indiscriminate violence and deliberate attacks on Christians and on Muslims opposed to its radical ideology, and has subjected the peoples not only of Nigeria that gets the most attention, but of Cameroon, Chad, and Niger to unspeakable acts of terror, sexual violence, abductions, fatal attacks on places of worship. And so too Al-Shabaab and other tragic groups that tragically fit this profile. This is an immense challenge for us, these groups. Very hard to control. I was delighted that the United States Congress added to the reporting on countries that engage in religious oppression. And added to that now, our reporting on non-state actors and our ability to name non-state actors as entities of particular concern as well. Secondly, is the issue of blasphemy laws and apostasy laws in countries including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Sudan, and a number of others, as well as laws that purport to protect religious sentiments from offense. The United States has always opposed such laws, which are frequently used to oppress those whose religious beliefs happen to differ from the majority, and will continue to call for their repeal. These laws can create an atmosphere that leads to dangerous, unfounded, violent, vigilante justice in countries with weak formal justice systems. They're too often used by individuals as a pretext to justify violence in the name of religion, or as a false pretense under which they seek to settle personal grievances. The number of incidents that we've been able to document where a family of one religion is upset at a family of another religion because the son of the second family ran off with the daughter in the first family and made accusations against blasphemy that led to the imprisonment and death of the offending family, are legion. Business disputes being settled by someone getting someone locked up because of a false accusation of blasphemy. These laws can create an atmosphere that leads to this kind of violence. And this is a central challenge for us. Roughly a quarter of the countries in the world have blasphemy laws. More than 1 in 10 have laws or penalties or policies that penalize people for apostasy, for converting to another religion. This is a serious problem. These laws have been used over and over again in too many cases to limit the exercise of freedom of religion and expression. Governments have used these laws to attempt to arbitrate religious truth or orthodoxy, which almost always restricts the freedom of speech and freedom of religion of minorities. And understand what blasphemy is. It is a crime that punishes people for the simple expression of the core values or beliefs of their faith. It punishes people for engaging in sincere criticism or dissent from the religious views held with those in power, which is almost always the majority. Every time an Ahmadiyya Muslim asserts his or her belief that Muhammad was not the last prophet, they have engaged in blasphemous language according to the sensibilities of many mainstream students. Every time an atheist or a reformer questions the orthodoxy of religion, many will perceive it as blasphemy. This is a central challenge for us. And too often, as I said, it encourages people, mobs of people, when an accusation of blasphemy is made, simply to take the law into their own hands. Think of Pakistan. of the example that caught the attention of the world when a young Christian couple accused of blasphemy were taunted by a mob who grabbed hold of them and threw them to their death in a brick kiln in their store, in their own store. But consider the fate of an Afghan woman named Farkunda. Just a couple of years ago, during my tenure, she made her way home from work as a teacher's assistant. And she stopped at the shrine in downtown Kabul that she usually stopped in which she would say her prayers. And then, that day, she felt compelled to preach truth to power in a small and innocent way. She had always been offended that the caretaker of the shrines in Newton was selling charms outside the shrine, and she confronted him and accused him of doing something that was really un-Islamic, and that he should stop selling the charms. The discussion escalated into an argument, and the caretaker then accused her publicly of being a tool of Americans and having committed blasphemy by burning a Koran. A crowd gathered around to hear these incendiary accusations. Farkunda denied the accusations and tried to defend herself from an increasingly agitated mob. Before long, a member of the crowd urged the mob to take justice in its own hands and kill her. Some of the police nearby tried to intervene as the crowd began to beat Farkunda. The police officers finally gave up, however, stood back and watched mutely as the crowd tormented its victim. She was beaten with sticks and boards, kicked, run over by a car and dragged, thrown into a dry firebed, stoned, finally set on fire as bystanders reported the crime and police watched every act of barbarity. According to medical examiners, she died in tormented pain sometime during the attack, but the crowd continued to abuse her lifeless body. This is a particular heinous example, but one need look only at recent news stories to find the impact these have on people across the globe. Raif Badawi, the blogger in Saudi Arabia, who was accused of blasphemy and consigned to 1,000 lashes, stopped only by, after the first 100, by the international outcry. In Nigeria, a Sharia court in Kano sentencing 9 members of a Muslim sect to death for blasphemy for allegedly elevating the group's founder above the Prophet Muhammad. And the number of people in Pakistan, where scores of people are on death row for this. This happens all across the globe. Now, the good news is that in a number of those countries across the globe, there are efforts to stop the application of the laws. And we've had some success, because when I would visit with ministers of justice or ministers of religious affairs, they said, wait, why do you accuse us of blasphemy laws? Look at all the European countries that have blasphemy laws. But we're making some progress. We particularly focus on getting those that didn't actually implement the laws to visibly and noticeably take them off the books. In the time that I was in there, we had Iceland, in Denmark. Oh, you know, the UK only ended its blasphemy law in 2008. We had someone fined over a blasphemy law in Germany during the time that I was in office. But in those countries, there's small fines and they're more symbolic things than the kinds of, and certainly the 12 countries that still have death penalties for blasphemy. In Malta and other countries, we've gotten these laws changed. And then I would talk about that to these ministers of justice to push back and say we should follow that example. And they would turn to me and say, well, what about the 6 states in the United States of America that have blasphemy laws? Bet you didn't know that. 6 states. Just picture which states you think they are. Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Dakota, Wyoming, Oklahoma, and South Carolina. 6 states. Now, the Supreme Court in the 1950s says they can't implement those laws. But the fact they're on the books is really a disgrace for America. And now that I'm free to actually speak on these issues domestically, which I couldn't do when I was in office. I'm going to be making it a campaign to try and mobilize in effort to have every one of those 6 laws repealed. Well, today, also, you get countries that are just scared of the way people organize their lives around ideas and institutions that the government can't control. And so the government tries to regulate extensively what happens. North Korea and China are particular examples of that trend. And so to those who, in the guise of confronting terrorism or extremism, broadly repress non-violent religions as well as those espousing violence or impose broad restrictions on religious life. Russia continues to expand its vaguely formulated anti-extremism laws to justify arrest or raids on homes and places of worship. Tajikistan bans any child under 18 from participating in any public religious activities, supposedly on the ground that exposure to any form of religion will lead youth to violence. As I said to the foreign minister there, I said, this doesn't make any sense. You actually choose the imams who can preach from the pulpits. We may even think that's an overextension into the religious freedom of institutions. You give out messages of what did you preach about? And you tell the kids they can't hear. You go, when do you think they're going to learn about Islam? They're going to learn about it on the internet. They're going to learn about it on the radio. They're going to learn about it from their friends. Why is that a good idea? And yet they bar any child under 18 from participating in any kind of religious activity in any mosque, including all those mosques that are formally recognized mosques of the government itself. And Chinese officials have increased controls under Uyghur Muslims' peaceful religious expression and practice, including instances of banning beards and forcibly cutting them off, banning headscarves, limiting the observance of the fasting on Ramadan. Chinese officials have sought to politicize theology in state-sanctioned churches by compelling modifications of Christian teachings to conform to socialism. Now, there are many countries in which Christians face terrible obstacles to practicing their faith in 2018. Let me just, I've mentioned a number of these here, and I was particularly concerned of what I indicated in, is happening in Iraq, where we have such an effort, and in Syria, such an effort to protect these historic communities. I do want to lift up the complicated issue of Egypt, in which there are restrictions on religion and the government keeps control, and President al-Sisi has sharply curtailed human rights in general, cracked down on civil society, on a free press, on human rights groups, on lawyer groups who stand for civil rights, but has expanded protections of the Coptic community that is the largest Christian community in the Middle East, and has really challenged Muslim authorities to take on the extremist theologians in the Muslim community, particularly aimed at Al-Azhar and its complementary institution that issues fatwas in the country, and they have made some significant progress in doing that. And yet, you have this paradoxical response to how to think about President al-Sisi, making some progress here, but undermining his own stability in the long run by repeating some of the efforts of his predecessors to clamp down on a free and open society in his country. But I mention it simply because there are still 10 million Christians, Coptic Christians, in Egypt, and if that country doesn't make it, it is hard to see the survival of Christianity and its historic position in the Middle East really being able to make progress to reverse the trends of the last years. Now, I should point out that there are heroic examples in which religious leaders have stood against these trends across the globe. think of the Muslim leaders and Christian leaders who stood against the excesses of Christian militias and Muslim militias in the Central African Republic. The Pope's visit there was a landmark visit, where walls that had functionally established a Muslim ghetto, out of which they really were torn down when the Pope came, and have not been rebuilt since. And yet the tensions are still there and the country divided there. But that interfaith cooperation has helped quell the violence in the past and hopefully can in the future. Or incidents that we reported on our annual reports of Pakistan, a number of them where prominent Muslim leaders hearing about mobs on some of these blasphemy accusations, apostasy accusations, actually came out of their mosque, stood between the mob and the Christians who were the subject of these blasphemy accusations and talked down the mob and sent them away. But think about those people on that bus you may have read about in northern Kenya a couple of years ago, during the time I was in the State Department, where Al-Shabaab took over the bus and tried to separate the Muslim passengers from the Christian passengers. And when they've done that, when they took over the mall in Nairobi, they just killed the Christians there. They just murdered them. And the Muslim passengers refused to stand aside from the others and identify themselves. And it actually got them to back off. One person was killed, and the driver was injured, but a score of lives were saved by the bravery of people. And interfaith cooperations all across the globe are making an enormous difference. They not only are able to have an impact that no individual religious group could do alone, but in working together, they're modeling the very kind of society that they are trying to build. And often the Christian community is at the center of such efforts. So this is an extraordinary period of time for us in both pushing back against these excesses, but seeing a growing number of countries moving towards more authoritarian, repressive behavior in controlling the lives of their citizens. You know, there's good news and bad news. If you yearly poll or analysis of the levels of restriction on religious freedom tells us that 3/4 of the country do not have serious restrictions on religious freedom. The problem is that those countries that do, either from the government or from, even if the government is good, from social forces, those countries that do include China, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, the most populous nation in Africa. You're already back nearly a third of the world's population right there. And so while 3/4 of the country is good, 3/4 of the world's population, actually this year, in the latest poll, 79% of the world's population live in countries that have high or very high restrictions on religious freedom in the world. So every faith group has the obligation to care about those of their co-religionists across the globe. At the same time, we have to recognize that if any group can face persecution and oppression, no group will ever be safe. We have to do both, stand up for our own and stand together against religious oppression in any form. And the constant call of Pope Francis for religious freedom, one that echoes what his two predecessors have been so strong on, so often sets this call in a natural law universal language, testifying to the universal requirement here. And as Pope Francis has said, the most basic understanding of human dignity compels the international community through the norms and mechanisms of international law to do all that it can to stop and to prevent further systemic violence against ethnic and religious minorities and to protect innocent peoples. When individuals and communities are guaranteed the effective right exercise of their rights, they are not only free to realize their potential, they also, through their talents and hard work, contribute to the welfare and enrichment of society as a whole. In a world where various forms of modern tyranny seek to suppress religious freedom, Pope Francis continued, or try to reduce it to a subculture without right to a voice in the public square, or to use religion as a pretext for hatred and brutality, it is imperative that the followers of the various religious traditions join their voices in calling for peace, tolerance, and respect for the dignity and rights of all. Let us preserve freedom. Let us cherish freedom. Freedom of conscience, religious freedom, the freedom of each person, each family, each people, which is what gives rise to all rights. In other words, there's a power to be found when we advocate not just for people who share our own beliefs, but for those who share our own beliefs profoundly different. When Jews advocate for Christians who are persecuted for their beliefs, when Christians stand up against the scourge of anti-Semitism, when Christians advocate for Buddhists who are persecuted for their beliefs, when Hindus advocate for Muslims, when Muslims advocate for atheists. This is the challenge that we face, to stand together even while we confront our own. And if there is one place I would begin right now, it is the plight of the Rohingya Muslims in Burma. The last trip I took I had already been to Burma, met with the highest leaders of Burma, urged that they move to begin to mitigate the growing tensions against the Rohingya, that it would destabilize everything that Aung San Suu Kyi was trying to achieve, to solidify this extraordinary democratic victory that was achieved. And yet, the hatred against the Rohingya that permeates Buddhist society in Burma. The way they talk about them must be the way Americans in many areas of our country in the late 1800s talk about American Indians, or the way in the mid-20th century Europeans talked about the Roma, about gypsies. It permeates even the highest levels of civil society, of the academic world, of the cultural world. And for those who date themselves back centuries in that area, it has been a terrible tragedy. There were, again, just about the same with the Christians in Iran, about 1.2 million Rohingya just 20 years ago. By the time I left office, close to 200,000 of them have been forced out of the country. Now, another 700,000 have been forced out of the country. The brutality visited against them is appalling. I met with a mother sitting there with her two teenage daughters, who described to me how her husband had been killed in front of their eyes. And she was held as her two daughters were raped, and there was nothing that she could do. My friend Nick Kristof, the extraordinary writer in the New York Times, tells the story of the woman who saw her husband killed before her eyes and tried to protect her baby and hide her baby. One of the militia who were there saw the baby's leg sticking out and grabbed the baby and threw it into a bonfire in which they were burning the Quran and the other holy books. Mines being set on the escape routes through which they were going to flee to Bangladesh. The extraordinary challenges that Bangladesh faces now, which have been so welcoming to the Rohingya, now we're coming in such numbers as to overwhelm their capacity of destabilizing the area of Cox's Bazar here. I'm heading back there with a group of prominent religious leaders from the United States in just 2 weeks, and will return fittingly on Passover Eve to celebrate the Seder and the story of the March to Freedom, that all people who suffer religious oppression remember. One of the proudest moments I had was the day that the Dalai Lama attended his first Seder at my Seder, which I held that year in the Religious Action Center building that I ran for the Reformed Jewish movement. He had always asked Jews to explain how did we survive in exile without losing their identity. What was the secret? It would be a line he would ask almost every Jewish leader that the end of our Seder evening together, he said, "Now I begin to understand how you have survived. How many across the globe face such challenges. We have such important work to do on behalf of the Christian community, on behalf of any community that is oppressed." Allow me to conclude with a personal story. In the summer of 1939, my father, a very prominent Reform rabbi, traveled throughout Poland and Palestine. He was one of the last to see the glory of European Jewry in full bloom. He had attended the last World Zionist Congress held just months before the war began. And then he went off to travel through Central Europe. He visited Danzig, today known as Gdansk, where Solidarity, like Wałęsa and Solidarity, emerged, just days after the Nazis had taken over the city in an election in May of that year. He went with enthusiasm to see the magnificent, historic, famous main synagogue of this vibrant Jewish community. And to his utter dismay, in actions taken just before he arrived, it lay in ruins. Only the portal over what had been the beautiful entrance front doors was still intact. And on the lawn, there was a sign that had been erected by the Nazis which said, "Komm, lieber Mach von Juden, uns jetzt frei. Come, dear month of May, and free us from the Jews." With a chilling sense of the impending disaster symbolized by this scene, he gazed upward and saw the words, the ancient vision of Malachi, still inscribed over that remaining doorway. Halo avakad l'kulanu, halo elakad beran. Have we not all one Father? Hath not one God created us? Two visions, one of hatred and tyranny, the other of brotherhood and sisterhood, of unity and peace, one of oppression, the other of freedom, one of darkness and despair, the other of light and hope. My friends, this is the choice that we face today. And to the religiously oppressed in every land, who live in fear, afraid to speak of their beliefs, worship in underground churches or mosques or temples, lest authorities discover and punish their devotion to an authority beyond the state's control, who languish in prisons, bodies broken, spirits too often disfigured, subject to torture and horrendous punishment simply because they love God in their own way or question the existence of God, who feel so desperate that they flee their homes to avoid persecution, to avoid being killed, simply because of their faith. To all of them, all of us, as Americans of whatever faith, let us recognize that our nation can be, must be, a beacon of light and hope. I pray that you here at this university, with resources to help study these problems, to help lift up solutions to these problems, to help model the kind of world that is, in the end, the response to these problems, will help fulfill that dream. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Saperstein, so much for your enlightening us here today. Remarkable talk and a true awakening for me in some of these regions. Knowing that most Christians in the world facing persecution is really startling. I think it's also tremendous to consider that the majority, over a majority of the world's population, 79%, are living in these countries with these high levels of restriction. Perhaps now we can invite Rabbi James Rudin up to the front here, and also Isaac, if you don't mind as well, to please lead us in prayer for these persons. I'll ask Rabbi Rudin to go first, and then Isaac, please.
First of all, before I start my prayer, I don't know if you, Rabbi, so the banner at the entrance of the church, the same quote that what you just mentioned, have we not all one Father? Has not one God created us? And then we added, let us pray for peace. So quite touching for me to see how we can gather around the Holy Scriptures. Having in mind the Holy Scriptures, this is the prayer that I put together for today. Merciful Father, your children, Cain and Abel, once again have sinned. Innocent blood cry out to you. Do not punish us for our selfish crimes, but help us with your grace. Help us to end these crimes against believers, domestic and abroad. To those who have died, into your hands we entrust them. To those who mourn for them, bless them with peace of mind and heart. To us who cry to you, Father of mercy, give us the grace to endure and work for peace. Not to be habituated to suffering in death, but to be kind to each other. You are our Creator, our Father. I am able, and I cry to you. I am Cain. Help me not to be selfish and blind to my own brothers, those you have created as well. Help me, Almighty One. Help us, all merciful Father. Help us, omnipotent God, to live the faith we profess. And let us all say, Amen.
I think we all know, as Americans, how proud we are that Ambassador Rabbi Saperstein represented us in 35 countries around the world. We take pride that in his work with the State Department, he represented all of us in that sacred task. As we conclude today, this beautiful day of freedom here on the Saint Leo University campus and in this beautiful church, let us pause for just a moment, silent meditation, silent thought, as some of the words and inspiration that we heard. Let it seep into our souls and into our work. God of our mothers and fathers, as prisoners of hope, we ask for continued strength to achieve justice in our troubled world. May we, your children, never weaken or waver in our pursuit of that sacred task. Bless the lifelong work of David, our guest and our brother, in his lifelong quest to bring religious liberty and freedom of conscience to humanity throughout the world. And grant us, O God, the strength and courage to join him in that effort. And as we rejoice in the friendship that surrounds us, we echo the psalmist's eternal words, Hine matov manai, shevet achim yam yachad. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for sisters and brothers to dwell together, to work together in unity. And in that spirit, let us all say, Amen.
Thank you, everyone, for being present today. It means a lot to the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies that you be here. The center is now in its 20th year. So this is our 20th anniversary this year. And so please know we have a bright future. We have a table in the entryway that has more information about the Center for Catholic Jewish Studies. You can read about it there. We would always be appreciative of any sort of communication. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask us. Would you please join me in thanking Abbot Isaac for hosting us today, being so hospitable. So thanks also to the brothers as well for having us. I also want to ask you to thank once again Ambassador at Large, Saperstein. Thanks again to one and all of you. It's very good to see you today, and I wish you all the best. Have a wonderful week.